Law of diminishing marginal return states that A, as the size of a firm's plant increases, average cost eventually decreases. B says as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production with a given quantity of the fixed factor of production, the marginal product of the variable factor eventually diminishes. C says as the size of a plant increases, marginal product eventually decreases. D says as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production, total product eventually decreases. And E says as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production, its average cost eventually decreases. And so what we're looking at here is the relationship between diminishing marginal returns and basically the definition that it has, right? And so let's go down the line here and kind of see which one of these answer choices is going to be the best. So the first answer choice says, as the size of a firm's plant increases, average cost eventually decreases. So the first thing we have to note is that the law of diminishing marginal returns applies to all variable factors of production. And so increasing the size of a firm's plant is not going to be really all-encompassing of the range of factors of production that the law of diminishing marginal returns could apply to. And second, average cost eventually decreasing refers primarily, I would say, to maybe economies of scale. And so as the size of a firm's plant increases, average cost is going to decrease for a certain extent, but as you continue to increase, the average cost is still going to increase overall, because the law of diminishing marginal returns states that I guess it becomes more expensive to incorporate fixed factors or variable factors of production over time. And so we would not necessarily see that average cost is going to be really decreasing forever. So we're not going to favor choice A. B says as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production with a given quantity of the fixed factor of production, the marginal product of the variable factor eventually diminishes. And this is much better of an answer because, again, we see it's a very broad category of things. It uses any variable factor of production, not just a plant's size. And the key thing here is the idea that the marginal product of the variable factor eventually diminishes. And so when we think of the law of diminishing marginal returns, we can think of something like adding more employees. So you might add the first employee is maybe the most productive. The second employee is a little bit less productive. And if you have 100 employees cramped into a small room, you actually have that 100th employee doing very, very little to increase the overall production that only he can add. And so in that sense, the marginal product of the variable factor eventually diminishing is exactly what the law of diminishing marginal returns is trying to state. And so B is going to be a great answer. Let's make sure that none of the answer choices are better. C says as the size of a plant increases, marginal product eventually decreases. And again, we said that the size of a plant is not encompassing enough of all the variable factors of production for this to be what the overall law of marginal diminishing returns is aimed at. So it's not going to be C. D says as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production, total product eventually decreases. And so this can be construed to be fairly similar to B, to answer choice B, but if we see here that instead of referring to the marginal product of the variable factor, it refers to total product. And so we have to talk, and this is hinted at in the word marginal in the law of diminishing marginal returns, but we're always talking about marginal production. Total production, even if marginal production is very low, total production is still increasing. And for marginal production, for total production to decrease, we'd actually have to see marginal product decreasing as negative as well. And so that's very hard to see in most circumstances. And so it is very certainly not the definition of the law of diminishing marginal returns for total product to be decreasing, because that is a totally separate issue, not on the margin. So it's not going to be D. And E says, as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production, its average cost eventually decreases. We touched upon this earlier, but as you continue to use variable factors of production, it can become more and more expensive to continue to use those variables. And so we would actually maybe see average costs eventually increasing rather than decreasing. And so E is not going to be the right answer here. And so B is going to be the best answer here. The law of diminishing marginal return states as a firm uses more of a variable factor of production with a given quantity of the fixed factor of production, the marginal product of the variable factor eventually diminishes. And so let's take a look at what the answer choice that the tutor provided. And they also said the correct answer is B. The law of diminishing marginal return states as affirmed. So basically restating the answer choice. And so again, yeah, this is correct. This is a concept that students will just have to memorize. Right, and so this is again not really a calculation-based concept, and really just testing your knowledge of some of these terms.